Alright guys, so we're here today talking about Objective 1 of the Colonial America focus area. Objective 1 says I can compare political, economic, religious, and social reasons for the establishment of the 13 colonies by identifying the reason for settlement. Alright, so let's look at political reason look-fors. Alright, when we think of political reasons, we're thinking of government. We have self-government, the Virginia House of Burgesses, and the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. So you're going to be looking for these terms as we go through this presentation. Our economic reason look-fors, we have Jamestown, mercantilism, and plantations. Our religious reason look-fors, we have Plymouth, Massachusetts, Quakers, and Maryland. Our social reasons look-fors, we have Rhode Island and Georgia. Alright, our first two colonies, we have Jamestown, which is founded in 1607. You have to know that date. As a charter colony, which is a business to make money, and it settled in Virginia. So if you take a look at this picture here at the top, this is the Jamestown colony in Virginia. Here we have those old wooden ships over there in the background in the bay, Chesapeake Bay, and we have the building of the Jamestown Fort. All right, this would be the first permanent settlement in America. It wasn't the first. The first was Roanoke, the first British colony, and those colonists died or were killed by the Roanoke Indians, or they were abducted by aliens according to the History Channel. But wherever they went, we don't know where they went because there was no evidence of them when the Jamestown people showed up looking for them. So the Jamestown colony was paid for by the Virginia Company. It was financed by it. So the Jamestown colonists, when they showed up to their colony, they expected to find diamonds and jewelry and gold on the ground. They didn't find any of that. In fact, their first 2 years of the colony, they went through what we call a starving time, when they basically starved. Most of the colonists died of hunger, and they actually resorted to cannibalism, eating their own dead to live. Pretty gruesome stuff. But they did find something that would make them a lot of money, and that's tobacco. So the Jamestown colonists started cultivating tobacco. And eventually, by 1620, they started using slaves from Africa to cultivate the tobacco fields, and tobacco made them very, very, very rich. So they also needed rules and laws to govern their colony. The King of England was 6 weeks away by boat, and it was not very practical for the king to rule a colony being so far away. So the colonists needed to come up with a set of laws and rules for them to live by, so they developed what we call the Virginia House of Burgesses. And this is going to be the first representative government in America. So they would make decisions like rules and laws that the colonists needed to be successful, to thrive in their colony. This was the first type of government in the colonies, and it was really, really important. Okay, Plymouth was founded in 1620 by the Puritans / Pilgrims. They're kind of the same people, religiously speaking. So they left England seeking religious freedom because they were persecuted back in England, and they settled in Massachusetts. They were on this boat called the Mayflower. Mayflower represents newness, new beginnings, and they were seeking a new life in America, or in the colonies. So they knew of the problems that the Jamestown colonists went through with the starving time and with the cannibalism. It was rumored that the Jamestown people did that, at least. So the people on the Mayflower, they signed the Mayflower Compact. And only the men can sign this document. And this document basically said, we're going to work together to survive. We're going to make some laws that are going to be good for everybody, so our colony can thrive and be successful. This is the first type of self-government we have in America, which is also really super important. So the colony was created to be a religious example for the rest of the world. So you would have the Pilgrims and Puritans saying that we're going to be the world's best community because look how perfect we are God's chosen people. And they were very strict religiously. They didn't believe in dancing, no drinking, no card playing, basically no fun. All they did was pray all day and work. And if you wanted to be like an important person in the colony, like a part of the colonial government, if you wanted to vote, you had to be a member of the Puritan Church. If you were not a member of the Puritan Church, or if you broke their religious laws, they either kicked you out of the colony or they shunned you, which basically they ignored you and bullied you. So as you can see, a lot of people are going to want to leave the Plymouth colony because they thought that the Puritans were too strict. All right. So if we check out this page, we have our New England colonies. We have Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. The founder from Massachusetts is John Winthrop. You don't have to know him. The founder of New Hampshire is John Mason. You don't have to know him. You do need to know Thomas Hooker. He's the founder of Connecticut. And you do need to know Roger Williams. He's the founder of Rhode Island. Let's go to our reason row. So the reason that Massachusetts was set up was for religious freedom for Puritans only. So if you're a Puritan, you can enjoy your religious freedom. If you're not a Puritan, you really didn't have any. All right. The reason New Hampshire was established it was set up to be a trading and fishing village. You don't really have to know that too much. But you do need to know that Connecticut was set up so that people can have more political freedom. So Thomas Hooker left the Massachusetts Bay Colony and he set up Connecticut and he wrote the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, which granted voting rights to non-church members, which was a big deal. So Connecticut became a place for people who did not agree with the Puritan colony who wanted to participate in the colonial government, which was really the first type of like religious freedom that we see in government, that is, okay? Rhode Island became a colony for all religious groups. So you have a lot of splintering Christian groups and even some non-Christian religious groups, and they were accepted in Rhode Island. So Rhode Island became a place of religious freedom. Connecticut became a place of political freedom. Those are the two differences there. So let's move the economy row. The economy is the same for all of these colonies because this is what they did to make money. Basically, they built boats. They did a lot of fishing. They cut down a lot of trees. And that's what we have. Connecticut, the only difference is you have a lot of rum and whiskey and alcohol production, with sugar being produced out in the West Indies. So the Caribbean islands is the West Indies. So the Caribbean islands would produce a lot of sugar, because down in the Caribbean islands, there's huge sugar plantations where they have tens of thousands of slaves growing sugar, and that sugar was shipped to Connecticut to be distilled into alcohol like rum, and then that was shipped either to England or to Africa. All right, next slide. Middle colonies. Our middle colonies are New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. All right, the founder of New York is Peter Minuit. You don't have to know him, but you do need to know William Penn, the founder of Pennsylvania. New Jersey, the founder of New Jersey is Lord Berkeley and Sir George Carteret. You don't have to know New Jersey's founders, and you don't have to know Delaware's founders. The only founder you need to know on the middle colonies is William Penn. Reasons. The only reason you need to know is Quakers. The Quakers were a place where the Quakers could go. Pennsylvania was a place where the Quakers could go. Pennsylvania was a place set up by William Penn for his religious group called the Quakers, and they believed in religious freedom and religious tolerance, and they did not agree with slavery. They were an anti-slavery group. Friendswood, Texas, where I live, is a place set up by Quakers. So Quakers is also known as Society of Friends. They're really big into peaceful living. They're kind of like the Amish up in Pennsylvania. They build their own furniture out of wood. They have very kind of unique religious beliefs where They believe in old-fashioned living with no electricity, and they are very peaceful people. Really nice guys. Okay, economy. If you look at the economy of the middle colonies, you got to trade, but the thing that I want you to really know is they have a lot of wheat and corn, and that would be used to make bread. So they would be known as the bread basket colonies. So the middle colonies would grow a lot of food crops, stuff to make bread out of. So they're called the bread basket colonies. The southern colonies, we have Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Their climate and geography is perfect for cultivating or growing cash crops. If you look at their economy, we have tobacco, 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 and Georgia, you would have indigo, which is a plant used to make blue dye, rice, and sugar. Tobacco was the chief crop in the early colonial period because it would make a lot of money because it's a highly addictive substance in nicotine, cigarettes being addictive as they are. All right, let's talk about founders. Let's go back to the top. You don't need to know really Lord Baltimore. He was the founder of Maryland. John Smith founded Virginia. If you watch Pocahontas, you know he was a good leader. He got the colonists to stop being lazy and work together to survive. You don't really need to know him. And for the founders of North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, you really don't need to know those guys. The reasons you do need to know. So Maryland was a refuge for Catholics. Catholics were extremely persecuted back in England, and they sought religious freedom in Maryland. So Maryland would be for Catholics. Think of Mary had a little land. Maryland for Catholics. If you say that to yourself enough, you'll remember it. Virginia was for economic opportunity. Virginia was a place where Jamestown was, and a lot of people were moving to Virginia to set up farms or plantations to get rich growing tobacco. North Carolina, South Carolina would basically be plantations. In Georgia would also be plantations, but their people would go there for a fresh start. So Georgia was a place for people that we call debtors and prisoners. If you were in jail in England and if you owed money, you can go to Georgia for a new life. People wouldn't care if you were in jail or not, and your debt was erased. Why Georgia? Because Georgia was the southernmost colony which bordered the British's enemy, the Spanish. So the people living in Georgia were like a human buffer shield, protecting the rest of the colonies in case the Spanish ever attacked. That's why it was a place for prisoners and debtors. Check that out. Savage, right? Okay, guys, so these are the southern colonies. All right, so we need to talk about mercantilism and triangular trade. Let's look at this big definition. Mercantilism, a major reason England wanted to start the colonies in North America. Mercantilism is a way to make money. England started colonies, got raw materials from them, trees, sugarcane, tobacco, and etc., and shipped it back to England. In England, they processed the raw materials into items people would want to buy. The money from these items only went to the mother country, England. Let's take a look at the map. Okay, look at North America. We have our 13 colonies. You have your 3 colonial regions. You have your southern colonies, middle colonies, New England colonies. Each of these regions are producing different raw materials. In the southern colonies, you're growing tobacco and indigo. Remember, it's a plant used to make purple dye to have like purple or blue or red shirts and stuff like that. Your middle colonies is producing iron ore, which is used to make metal, and grain crops used to make bread. Your New England colonies, they are producing whale oil used to put lamps so you can see at nighttime. They're producing a lot of lumber, which England desperately needs because they already cut down all their forests and need trees. They need wood from the trees in New England. And also New England is really big into fishing and whaling. All right. So the colonies would provide raw materials would be shipped to England. England would take these raw materials and make stuff out of them. So they would make furniture out of the wood from New England. From the tobacco from the southern colonies, they would make cigarettes. From the grain crops from the middle colonies, they would make bread. Or from the iron ore from the middle colonies, they would make metal out of. And then they would sell it back to the colonists at an inflated cost to make a profit. Or they would take those finished products and send them to Africa to be traded for slaves. Slaves were brought out of Africa and sent to plantations in the New World. The only colonies you're going to have slaves in are in your southern colonies working the fields and the plantations. Slaves are also being sent to this group of islands right here that we call the Jamaican Islands, or what we call the West Indies. All of these islands, which today are Jamaica, Haiti, Dominican Republic, and your other Caribbean islands, all they are is giant sugar plantations where millions of slaves would be sent to die working on plantations growing nothing but sugar, pure sugar. This is where we're going to have the beginning of the world sugar problem or epidemic. You would have the beginning of diabetes, the tooth decay, and other sugar obesity related illnesses. So the world's demand for sugar would cause the growth of the sugar plantation in the Caribbean islands, and that would increase the demand for slaves out of Africa. In the 13 colonies, in the southern colonies, you would have a demand for tobacco, and later on cotton. That's also going to be a reason why more and more millions of slaves being brought out of Africa to work in those fields. Okay, so if you take a look at this trade, it forms a triangle. The 13 colonies are sending raw materials to England. Finished products are being sent back to the colonies and also sent to Africa. Slaves are being sent out of Africa to the colonies. So that forms a triangle, and it's over the Atlantic Ocean. We call this the triangle trade. One other thing about the triangle trade, the journey that the slaves had to make, the awful journey from Africa to the New World, is called the Middle Passage. And if you were to Google search it, you would see the boats that they were used, the slave ships. They were awful, and the slaves had to live in awful conditions to make across the ocean, and it was a pure horrifying experience, right? Okay, so triangle trade. The triangle trade was the flow of people and resources. They pick up slaves in Africa, ship them to the Americas to work and to pick up raw materials. Raw materials go to England to be made into goods which can be sold in England, or trade in Africa for more slaves. So guys, that's where we get triangle trade from, and it's part of mercantilism, where the colonies exist to benefit the mother country. All right. So salutary neglect. All this means is that the king was ignoring the colonies, and he didn't care if the colonies developed self-government as long as they made the king money. So as long as the colonies are making money, the king doesn't care what they do. In fact, he's probably happy they're having self-government because he doesn't have to worry about them. So let's see what it says here. Because England was so far away, the government had a hard time communicating rules and laws to the American colonies. Remember, guys, there's no cell phones, there's no internet, there's no mail, no planes, nothing quick, no immediate form of communication. For a boat to make it from England to the colonies, it took 6 weeks. And for a boat to make it back again, it's another 6 weeks. So you're looking at 3 months communication back and forth. So if the king sent a message to the colonies and expected the message back, it would take 3 months for that to happen. That's a long time to wait for anything. So because of that, the colonies started to come up with their own rules and laws. So if you look at this, it says, because of this, American colonists had to start governing themselves with the elected officials and town meetings. Americans made their own laws from the beginning. England also chose to ignore a lot of the illegal things that the colonies did. Because remember, guys, in the mercantilism system, the 13 colonies were only really supposed to trade with England. But the colonists also liked trading with France and Spain, but they weren't supposed to do that. So they smuggled a lot of items. They sold they sold raw materials to countries they weren't supposed to because they can make more money. So the king ignored this for a while because he was like, hey, as long as they're making me my money, I don't care if they kind of do these illegal things and look the other way. All right. Also, it was really difficult for the king to manage his colonies and to enforce the rules because the distance was just too much. So this was called salutary neglect. Salutary neglect made the colonists feel like they had the power to run their own communities without England's help or permission. So the colonists were kind of used to doing their own thing from the beginning. From the very first colony of Jamestown, the colonists were starting and getting used to running their own lives, making their own rules, having their own representatives, calling their own shots. And this led to self-government. So examples of self-government in colonies, we have town hall meetings. This is really what happened in the New England colonies, where it would get super cold in the wintertime, and with all that snow and nothing to do, the leaders of the community would sit around in big buildings and they would talk about politics and governing their own colonies, and they would make rules and laws and talk about how much they don't like the king and talk about how much that they should rule themselves and that kind of thing. Elected legislator. A legislator is a group of people who makes rules, and that's going to be the House of Burgesses. So it says elected legislator. In some communities, town members would vote for representatives to create laws on behalf of the whole town. Representatives had to be careful to do a good job, or next time the town voted, they would vote for someone else. So just like in our country today, Trump is up for re-election. He's running against Biden. The election day is November 3rd. If you think Trump is doing a great job, you're probably going to vote for him again. If you think Trump is doing an awful job, you're going to vote for Biden. Okay? So the first example we have of an elected legislator is the Virginia House of Burgesses. Written documents, a written set of rules. We live in a world of rules. And our top rule list, if you think about it like that, is going to be the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution is just nothing more than a plan of government. So if you look at written documents, it says documents like this were rule books which told the members of the community how to work and govern themselves. These documents helped all community members follow the rules for a fair government, like the Constitution does today. So the first written set of rules, or rule book, is the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, which was in the state of, or colony of, Connecticut. Boom. Okay, guys, so that's it for Objective 1. There is some Objective 2 and 3 stuff in here in this presentation. But if you take a look at the things that we needed to do, which was compare political, economic, religious, and social reasons for the establishment of 13 colonies, it's definitely in there. And we identified the reason for settlement. Okay, guys, so this wraps up Objective 1. Please feel free to rewatch this video. I hope this helps in your note taking, and good luck on your test.